Skarn's manipulator appendages trembled as she guided her ship into the Carrion Nebula's outer boundary. The radiation readings spiked immediately, Class 9 stellar death, the kind of cosmic graveyard that turned advanced starships into drifting tombs within days. Perfect. Behind her, somewhere in the void, the human bounty hunter named Maeve continued her pursuit. 3 weeks now since Skarn had fled the Outer Rim territories. 3 weeks of that damned human following her jump signature like some sort of predatory algorithm. But no one followed prey into the Carrion Nebula. The radiation alone would fry navigation systems within 48 hours. Life support would fail shortly after. Even the most advanced Nalkith military vessels avoided this region. Skarn's confidence restored itself as her ship's sensors immediately began registering system degradation warnings. The nebula's ionized particles were already interfering with her quantum drives. Another few hours, and even she would need to turn back before permanent damage occurred. The human would have to give up now. Simple mathematics. The Nalkith had been tracking human capabilities for decades since first contact. They were moderately intelligent, possessed adequate technology, showed reasonable problem-solving skills. Nothing exceptional, certainly nothing that would allow survival in conditions that challenged military-grade Nalkith vessels. Skarn activated her ship's historical records, reviewing the nebula's casualty statistics. In the past century, 47 ships had attempted passage through the Carrion Nebula's outer regions. 3 had emerged successfully. None had attempted deep penetration toward the core regions where Skarn was now heading. The stellar cartography was brutal in its simplicity. The nebula contained the remnants of 7 collapsed stars, their death throes creating a cascade of radiation fields, gravitational anomalies, and particle storms that rendered conventional navigation impossible. Ships entering the region faced systematic equipment failure within the first 24 hours, followed by life support breakdown, communication blackout, and eventual hull breach from sustained radiation exposure. Skarn's vessel was specifically designed for hazardous environment operations. Military-grade radiation shielding, redundant life support systems, hardened electronics capable of functioning in electromagnetic interference that would cripple civilian vessels. She could survive perhaps a week in these conditions before permanent damage became inevitable. A human bounty hunter in a civilian craft wouldn't last 6 hours. 7 days passed in relative peace before Skarn's emergency beacon began broadcasting its distress signal. Her ship's systems had degraded beyond her ability to repair them. Radiation exposure was beginning to affect her cellular matrix, and the nebula's electromagnetic interference had rendered her navigation arrays useless. The beacon was a last resort, a signal that might reach rescue vessels operating in the outer regions, though none were likely to risk entering the nebula's deadly interior. The transmission arrived 16 hours later on standard frequencies, cutting through radiation interference that should have made communication impossible. Skarnville 19, this is independent contractor Mae Parker. I'm reading your distress signal approximately 47,000 kilometers off your starboard. Bit of a radiation storm between us at the moment, but I should be able to reach your position within the next 6 hours. The Nalkith fugitive stared at her communication array, certain she was hallucinating from radiation exposure. The human was inside the nebula. Not only inside, but apparently functional enough to maintain communications and provide precise navigation coordinates. "This is impossible," Skarn whispered, her vocal cords producing the subsonic harmonics of deep confusion. The transmission continued with the same calm, almost apologetic tone. "Fair warning, my life support's running a touch warm, so I might need to borrow some of your environmental gear once I get there. Nothing serious, just the secondary oxygen recyclers acting up again. These older ships, you know how it is. Skarn activated her external sensors, pushing them to maximum range despite the radiation interference. There, a faint energy signature moving steadily through a radiation field that registered Class 8 lethality on her instruments. The human's ship appeared to be not just surviving, but maintaining steady acceleration through conditions that had forced Skarn's own vessel into emergency power conservation. How? The question escaped her throat in a barely audible whistle. She reviewed her xenological databases, searching for any reference to human radiation resistance. The files contained standard first contact biological surveys, carbon-based life forms, standard oxygen-nitrogen atmospheric requirements, moderate physical capabilities, nothing indicating exceptional resistance to stellar radiation. Perhaps the human possessed superior technology. Experimental shielding systems, military-grade life support, advanced navigation arrays designed for hazardous environment operations. But Maeve had identified herself as an independent contractor, civilian designation, not military or government research. 8 hours later, a docking tube connected to her airlock with a precise mechanical thunk. The human emerged wearing what appeared to be a standard environmental suit, with several improvised modifications. Additional radiation shielding, jury-rigged from what looked like cooking equipment, and backup oxygen canisters, duct-taped to her belt. Right then, Maeve said, removing her helmet to reveal short auburn hair and remarkably calm eyes. "Let's have a look at your radiation poisoning, shall we?" Skarn's chromatic patches shifted to confused orange. "You are functional enough," Maeve replied, unpacking what appeared to be a medical kit assembled from spare parts and improvised components. Bit of nausea, some cellular disruption in the extremities, but nothing that won't sort itself out with time. "How are you feeling?" "I am dying," Skarn said bluntly. "Radiation exposure has damaged my cellular matrix beyond emergency repair protocols. Without immediate medical intervention, I have perhaps 48 hours before systemic failure." Maeve nodded seriously, examining readings on a handheld scanner that appeared to have been assembled from 3 different devices. "Right, that's not ideal. Good news is, radiation sickness responds well to aggressive intervention if we catch it early. Bad news is, my medical supplies are a bit improvised at the moment." "Improvised how?" Maeve began setting up equipment that defied easy identification. "Well, the proper radiation treatments require isotope stabilizers, cellular regeneration stimulants, that sort of thing. I've got the basic compounds, but I've had to get creative with the delivery systems. Over the next 6 hours, Maeve administered a treatment regimen that combined standard medical procedures with techniques that appeared to violate several principles of Nalkith physiology. She used improvised equipment to deliver precisely calibrated doses of compounds that somehow stabilized Skarn's cellular damage while maintaining biological integrity. "There we are," Maeve said finally, packing away her improvised medical kit. "You should be feeling better within the next 12 hours. Radiation exposure's a bit like a nasty flu, makes you feel dreadful while it's happening, but proper treatment clears it right up." Skarn's diagnostic systems confirmed the impossible. Her cellular damage was not just stabilized, but actively reversing. The treatment had been more effective than military-grade Nalkith medical protocols. "How did you know the correct dosages?" Skarn asked. "Your species has no documented experience with Nalkith physiology." Maeve shrugged. "Basic principles are the same across most carbon-based life forms. Bit of educated guessing, really. Human medical training covers a fair range of biological variations." "You are saying this is standard human medical knowledge?" "More or less," Maeve replied. "Emergency field medicine covers quite a lot of situations. You learn to adapt to whatever's available. As Maeve prepared to leave, Skarn found herself studying the human with new attention. Maeve's casual competence had initially seemed like superior technology or species-specific advantages, but watching her work, Skarn was beginning to understand that Maeve's effectiveness came from something different entirely. The human treated impossible survival conditions as engineering problems to be solved with available resources. She approached potentially lethal scenarios with the same calm professionalism most species reserved for routine maintenance tasks. "Maeve," Skarn said as the human prepared to depart. "Why are you here? The Carrion Nebula is classified as a navigation hazard by every spacefaring species. No one enters this region except in emergency situations." Maeve paused in her equipment packing, looking genuinely puzzled. "Well, you're here, so obviously it's not impossible to navigate. My ship is specifically designed for hazardous environment operations." "Right, but you're much smaller than me," Maeve pointed out reasonably. "Lower body mass, different metabolism. If you can manage it with specialized equipment, I figured I could probably manage it with standard gear and a bit of creativity." Skarn's chromatic patches cycled through several configurations. "That's not how radiation exposure works, isn't it?" Maeve looked genuinely curious. "How does it work then?" Before Skarn could formulate a response, Maeve had sealed her helmet and returned to her ship. The docking tube disconnected with mechanical precision, leaving Skarn alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that her understanding of human capabilities might be fundamentally inadequate. She waited until Maeve's ship had disappeared into the nebula's radiation storms before activating her engines. Time to try a different escape route. 16 days later, Skarn had convinced herself the first encounter was an anomaly. Perhaps the human possessed superior radiation shielding, or her species had evolved unusual resistance to cosmic background radiation. The Nalkith databases contained limited information about human biology, mostly outdated xenological surveys from first contact protocols. She'd waited until Maeve completed the medical treatment, then slipped away during the human's sleep cycle. Deeper into the nebula this time, toward the dense core where even emergency signals couldn't penetrate the ionized matter. The core regions represented a quantum leap in lethality. Where the outer boundaries contained Class 8 radiation levels, the inner nebula registered consistent Class 11 readings, sufficient to sterilize planetary surfaces. The gravitational anomalies created by 7 collapsed stellar masses made navigation a three-dimensional nightmare of shifting spacetime distortions. Skarn's ship was already showing critical systems failures after 3 days in the core region. Her primary navigation array had been damaged by electromagnetic interference. Life support was operating on emergency power. The radiation shielding was degrading faster than her repair systems could compensate. 3 weeks of relative peace had given her time to plan her next move, perhaps toward the Helix sector, where extradition treaties were more flexible. The transmission arrived on a jury-rigged emergency frequency, cutting through radiation interference that should have made communication impossible. "Skarn, it's Maeve again. Sorry for the delay, had a spot of engine trouble around the middle sectors. Nothing too serious, just needed to fabricate some replacement parts. I'm about 72 hours behind your current position, give or take. Thought you should know." The Nalkith's secondary brain clusters fired in rapid succession, processing the impossibility. The nebula's core region contained radiation levels that would sterilize most planets. Her own ship was already showing critical systems failures, and she'd only been here 3 days. The human had been navigating these conditions for weeks. "Fabricate replacement parts," Skarn spoke to her empty cabin. "From what materials?" As if responding to her question, The transmission continued with that same calm, apologetic tone. Bit creative with the repairs this time, I'm afraid. Had to cannibalize some of the galley equipment for the navigation array, and the toilet's been repurposed into a secondary radiation filter. Not ideal, but it's keeping things running smoothly. Should reach your vicinity by Thursday, assuming nothing else breaks down. Thursday, the human was tracking her location precisely enough to estimate arrival times. In a nebula where sensor range was measured in kilometers, not light years, and where gravitational distortions made conventional navigation impossible, Skarn activated her ship's historical databanks, searching for any reference to human persistence hunting behaviors. What she found in the xenological files made her chromatic patches shift to deep purple, the Nalkith expression of existential dread. Terran predator species evolved as persistence hunters. Primary strategy involves sustained pursuit over extended timeframes, wearing down prey through relentless pressure rather than burst-speed attacks. Historical data indicates humans capable of tracking individual targets across continental distances over periods measured in weeks or months. Recommended defensive strategy: immediate territorial exit upon detection. The notation was buried in subsection 47 of the Biological Survey data, marked as historical curiosity rather than tactical intelligence. But reading it now, Skarn understood that she was dealing with something far more dangerous than a bounty hunter with superior technology. The human wasn't just following her. She was hunting her, using behavioral patterns evolved over millions of years of predatory selection. Maeve's casual competence suddenly took on a different meaning. The improvised repairs, the matter-of-fact survival in impossible conditions, the calm tracking through lethal cosmic phenomena, these weren't technological advantages or species-specific adaptations. They were expressions of a hunting methodology so fundamentally effective that it had allowed humans to dominate their homeworld despite lacking the natural weapons, armor, or speed of other apex predators. Skarn's manipulator appendages moved frantically across her control surfaces, trying to coax more power from her dying engines. She needed to reach the cascade zones, regions where stellar collapse had created radiation fields so intense that even military vessels couldn't survive them. If she could trigger her emergency stasis systems and drift through the cascade in suspended animation, perhaps she could escape detection long enough for the human to give up the pursuit. The plan was desperate, potentially suicidal, but continuing to run conventional flight patterns would only postpone the inevitable. Maeve was treating impossible survival scenarios as routine navigation problems, which meant conventional escape strategies were useless. As Skarn programmed her emergency systems, she found herself wondering about human society. If Maeve represented average human capability, what were their military forces like? Their exploration teams, their research specialists? The galaxy, she reflected, might have seriously underestimated humanity's operational parameters. 18 days after that transmission, Skarn had tried something desperate. She'd deliberately flown her ship into a cascade radiation field, the kind of stellar phenomenon that created temporary Class 15 radiation levels, lethal to most known life forms within minutes. Her plan was simple: trigger her emergency stasis pod, set the ship's autopilot for minimum drift, and wait out the human's pursuit in suspended animation. The cascade zones represented the absolute pinnacle of cosmic lethality, created by the intersection of multiple stellar collapse fields. They generated radiation levels that could penetrate military-grade shielding and destroy electronic systems at the molecular level. Even specialized research vessels avoided these regions. The Nalkith classified them as absolute navigation hazards, regions so dangerous that no conceivable technology could provide adequate protection. Skarn had programmed her stasis systems to wake her after the cascade passed, gambling that 48 hours in suspended animation would allow her to survive conditions that would kill any pursuing vessel. The radiation would destroy any ship attempting to follow, and even if Maeve somehow survived, she'd never be able to track a ship in complete sensor blackout. The radiation cascade had lasted 67 hours, longer than predicted, but within survivability parameters for her stasis systems. Skarn had awakened to find her ship's hull partially melted and most systems operating on emergency power. The cascade field had passed, leaving her vessel barely functional but intact. Her desperate gamble had worked. For 20 minutes, the communication came through on an emergency frequency that shouldn't have existed, transmitted with enough power to penetrate radiation interference that blocked all conventional signals. "Morning, Skarn. Hope you slept well. Quite a light show out there yesterday. Radiation cascade fields are bloody spectacular when you're properly positioned. Had to ride it out in the cargo bay with the emergency gear, but managed to keep the important bits functional." The human's ship appeared on Skarn's sensors, approaching at steady velocity through space that still registered Class 12 radiation levels. Not only had Maeve survived the cascade field, she'd apparently tracked Skarn's ship through it while maintaining navigational precision sufficient to intercept her exact drift trajectory. "I've been thinking," the transmission continued, "we should probably have a proper conversation when I get there. This chase is getting a bit silly, don't you think? I mean, I'm enjoying the tour of the nebula, but I suspect you're rather tired of running by now." Skarn's manipulator appendages moved across her control surfaces with increasing desperation, trying to coax emergency power from systems that had been damaged beyond conventional repair. The human was right. This was becoming absurd. Maeve had survived 3 separate scenarios that should have been absolutely lethal, apparently by treating cosmic-scale death traps as minor engineering problems. The mathematical reality was becoming inescapable. Human persistence, hunting methodology, combined with apparent immunity to conditions that killed other species, created a pursuit capability that rendered conventional escape strategies useless. Maeve would continue following her through whatever cosmic hazards existed, improvising solutions to survival problems that had no theoretical solutions. When Maeve's ship docked 40 minutes later, Skarn didn't attempt to resist. The human emerged from her airlock wearing the same environmental suit, now decorated with additional improvised modifications that defied easy identification. Her helmet's faceplate had been replaced with what appeared to be a welding mask with hand-carved ventilation holes. "Right," Maeve said, settling into Skarn's cabin with the casual air of someone arriving for afternoon tea. "Let's discuss your outstanding warrant, shall we?" Skarn studied the human with something approaching professional curiosity. Maeve's equipment modifications represented a level of improvised engineering that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological requirements for survival in extreme environments. She was treating problems that required specialized research teams as routine maintenance issues. "Your species possesses remarkable adaptability," Skarn said carefully. Maeve looked up from her equipment maintenance, genuinely puzzled. "Does it? I wouldn't have thought so particularly. Humans adapt to all sorts of conditions, different climates, atmospheric pressures, gravitational fields. Rather basic survival capability, really." "Basic survival capability," Skarn repeated slowly. "Maeve, we are in the most dangerous region of known space. The radiation here can sterilize entire solar systems. Your equipment has failed multiple times. You have been improvising life support from spare parts." "Well, yes," Maeve said reasonably, attaching what looked like a food heating element to her suit's ventilation system. "That's rather the point, isn't it? Job like this, you expect a few complications along the way. Complications? Skarn's chromatic patches shifted through several rapid configurations. Maeve, your ship should have been destroyed days ago. You should be dead from radiation exposure. Your navigational systems shouldn't function in these electromagnetic fields. Maeve paused in her work, looking at Skarn with the patient expression of someone explaining basic mathematics to a child. Should be, perhaps, but I'm not, so obviously the equipment's working well enough. Bit of improvisation never hurt anyone. The distinction escapes me. Think of it this way, Maeve said, returning to her repairs. Back on Earth, humans used to hunt animals called antelope. Big, fast creatures, much faster than humans, much better adapted to their environment. But humans would just keep following them. Day after day, week after week, the antelope would run until they collapsed from exhaustion, because they couldn't understand that the human wasn't trying to catch them immediately. The human was just persistent. Skarn's linguistic processing centers struggled with the concept. You're comparing me to prey animals from your homeworld. Not comparing, Maeve said gently. Explaining. See, the antelope thought the chase was about speed or cleverness or finding the right hiding place. But it was never about any of that. It was about time. Humans are very good at time. And I'm the antelope in this scenario. You're the one who decided to run, Maeve said matter-of-factly. I'm just following standard bounty collection protocols. Though I'll admit, this particular chase has been more interesting than most. Usually takes a week or two at most. Skarn found herself studying the human with new understanding. Maeve's casual competence had initially seemed like technological superiority or species-specific adaptation. But watching her work, Skarn was beginning to comprehend the real source of human effectiveness. Maeve didn't survive impossible conditions because she was specially equipped for them. She survived because she simply refused to accept that they were impossible. When her equipment failed, she improvised replacements. When conventional navigation became impossible, she developed unconventional solutions. When radiation levels exceeded survivability parameters, she modified her definition of survivability. How long would you have continued following me? Skarn asked. Maeve considered the question seriously, her hands continuing to work on equipment modifications with practiced efficiency. Well, the contract doesn't specify a time limit. Standard bounty terms are pursuit until delivery or confirmed termination of target. So, indefinitely, I suppose, even if it took years. Even if it took years. Maeve's tone remained matter-of-fact, as if discussing grocery shopping rather than multi-year pursuit through lethal cosmic phenomena. I've had longer contracts before. 3 years tracking a smuggler through the Magellan clusters. 5 years pursuing a war criminal through contested space. Time's not really a factor in this kind of work. Skarn's manipulator appendages went still. The human wasn't boasting or threatening. She was simply stating operational parameters. Maeve would have followed her through the nebula, through whatever came after the nebula, through conditions that destroyed ships and killed entire crews, for as long as necessary to complete her contract. Not because she enjoyed it, not because she was particularly skilled at survival. Simply because that was the job, and humans apparently didn't abandon jobs due to inconvenient environmental conditions. I believe, Skarn said slowly, I would like to discuss surrender terms. Over the following 2 weeks, Maeve shared Skarn's ship, ostensibly for mutual safety, while they navigated the nebula's inner core together. In reality, Maeve was ensuring her quarry couldn't escape again, while simultaneously keeping both their vessels functional through conditions that should have destroyed them. During this time, Skarn observed Maeve's operational methodology with the fascination of a researcher studying an impossible phenomenon. The human treated each system failure as a puzzle to be solved rather than a crisis to be endured. When the primary atmospheric recyclers failed, Maeve had jury-rigged replacements using components from the food processing systems. When navigation arrays were damaged by electromagnetic interference, she'd created backup systems using spare communication equipment and mathematical calculations performed by hand. Most remarkably, Maeve approached each problem as if solutions were inevitable rather than theoretical. She didn't express concern about survival probability or calculate risk assessments. She simply identified what needed to be fixed and began fixing it, using whatever materials were available. "Maeve," Skarn said one day, watching the human perform maintenance on her environmental suit using tools that appeared to be improvised from kitchen utensils. "I've been reviewing my species' xenological databases. According to our best research, humans require specific atmospheric conditions, temperature ranges, radiation protection levels. You have been operating outside those parameters for nearly 2 months." Maeve paused in her work, looking at Skarn with mild interest. "Have I? That's probably not ideal then, though I've been feeling reasonably well, all things considered." "Reasonably well," Skarn's voice climbed several octaves. "Maeve, you've been exposed to enough radiation to kill a dozen members of my species. Your atmospheric mixture has been contaminated with toxic compounds from your improvised repairs. Your body temperature has been fluctuating outside normal human ranges for weeks." Maeve considered this information with the same calm attention she applied to navigation problems. "Right, well, that might explain the occasional headaches. Nothing serious, though. Human bodies are fairly good at sorting themselves out, given time." "Sorting themselves out?" Skarn stared at the human with something approaching awe. "Maeve, you're describing physiological adaptations that should be impossible. Your species isn't supposed to be capable of surviving these conditions." "Supposed to according to whom?" Maeve asked reasonably. "I mean, here I am, surviving them. So obviously we're capable of it." Skarn found herself reconsidering fundamental assumptions about human biology. The xenological surveys had focused on baseline environmental requirements, the conditions humans needed for long-term comfort and optimal health. But those surveys had apparently missed the critical question: what conditions could humans survive if they absolutely had to? The answer, based on Maeve's performance over the past 2 months, appeared to be almost anything. "How many other humans are like you?" Skarn asked. "Like me how? Capable of this?" Skarn gestured toward the nebula outside, the improvised ship repairs, the casual violation of known survival parameters. Maeve thought about it seriously, her hands continuing to modify her environmental equipment with practiced efficiency. "Most humans, I'd say. This isn't particularly unusual work. Bit more travel than average, perhaps, but nothing extraordinary. Most humans could survive in the Carrion Nebula for 2 months, while maintaining pursuit of a fleeing target." "Well, they'd complain about it more than I did," Maeve said with a slight smile. "But yes, most humans could manage it if they needed to. We're fairly adaptable as a species." Skarn felt something shift in her understanding of galactic power structures. If Maeve represented average human capability, then the xenological surveys had been catastrophically incomplete. The databases classified humans as a moderate technological capability species with standard biological resilience. But Maeve had been demonstrating capabilities that exceeded Nalkith military specifications while describing them as unremarkable. "Maeve," Skarn said slowly, "I think the Nalkith Council should probably know about this conversation." "Should they?" Maeve seemed genuinely interested, looking up from her equipment maintenance. "Why's that?" Skarn studied the human's expression, searching for any indication that Maeve understood the implications of her casual competence. She found only mild curiosity and continued focus on the technical problem she was solving. "Because," Skarn said carefully, I suspect we've been dramatically underestimating your species' operational parameters. Maeve nodded agreeably, returning her attention to the improvised device she was constructing. That does happen sometimes. Humans tend to surprise people. How often does it happen? Surprising people, Maeve considered the question. Rather frequently, actually. Humans don't fit most species prediction models very well. We tend to do things that other species consider improbable. Such as, well, Maeve said, connecting two components with improvised wiring, surviving in environments that are supposed to be lethal, solving problems that don't have theoretical solutions, continuing to function when conventional wisdom says we should have given up. That sort of thing. Skarn's chromatic patches shifted to thoughtful green. Maeve, when you accepted this bounty contract, what was your assessment of successful completion probability? Successful completion probability. Maeve looked genuinely puzzled by the question. I hadn't really considered it, to be honest. The contract specified location and delivery requirements. I accepted the terms and began pursuit. You didn't calculate the likelihood of successfully tracking me through hazardous space regions. Why would I need to calculate that? Maeve asked reasonably. You were in hazardous space regions, so obviously they were navigable. I just needed to follow you. Skarn realized she was witnessing a fundamental difference in species psychology. Nalkith operational planning involved extensive risk assessment, probability calculations, contingency planning for failure scenarios. Maeve approached the same challenges with what could only be described as casual inevitability. If something needed to be done, she simply did it, improvising solutions to problems as they arose. The human wasn't being brave or reckless. She simply didn't consider failure to be a relevant variable in her operational planning. 15 days later, Maeve's ship limped toward the nebula's outer boundary, her improvised repairs holding together through a combination of engineering creativity and what Skarn was beginning to recognize as typical human stubbornness. The Nalkith fugitive sat in the passenger seat, wearing standard restraints that Maeve had politely requested she not attempt to remove. Question, Skarn said, watching Maeve navigate around a radiation storm with the casual precision of someone parallel parking. When you first entered the nebula, what was your realistic assessment of survival probability? Maeve checked her instrument readings. A mix of standard equipment and improvised devices that violated several known principles of starship engineering. The navigation array was now a hybrid construction, incorporating components from the food processors, communication systems, and what appeared to be decorative lighting fixtures. Survival probability, Maeve said, making a course correction that avoided a particularly dense particle field. Hadn't really considered it, to be honest. You entered a Class 9 stellar death field without calculating survival odds. Well, you were in here, Maeve pointed out reasonably. So obviously it was survivable. Skarn's chromatic patches cycled through confused orange. My ship is specifically designed for hazardous environment operations. I have advanced radiation shielding, military-grade life support, emergency backup systems designed by Nalkith's finest engineers. Right, but you're much smaller than me, Maeve observed, adjusting controls on her improvised navigation system. Lower body mass, different metabolism. Figured if you could manage it, I probably could too. That's not how radiation exposure works, isn't it? Maeve looked genuinely curious, her attention divided between the conversation and avoiding a cluster of gravitational anomalies. How does it work then? Skarn realized she was trying to explain astrophysics to someone who had survived conditions that should have been lethal by apparently ignoring theoretical limitations entirely. Maeve, the radiation in this nebula should have destroyed your cellular structure within hours. Your DNA should be completely unraveled by now. Maeve said, making another course correction around a particularly dense particle field. Probably explains why I've been feeling a bit under the weather lately. Nothing serious, though. Nothing serious. Skarn's voice climbed several octaves. Maeve, you've been exposed to enough radiation to kill dozens of my people. You should be dead. Maeve considered this information with the same calm attention she applied to navigation problems. Should be, perhaps, but I'm not, so I expect it'll sort itself out. Human bodies are fairly good at managing unexpected conditions. As they approached the nebula's edge, Skarn found herself studying the modifications Maeve had made to both their ships. The human had essentially rebuilt 2 vessels worth of life support and navigation systems, using spare parts, improvised materials, and what appeared to be creative reinterpretation of engineering principles. Maeve, Skarn said, the repairs you've made to our ships, the improvised systems, the jury-rigged equipment. How did you learn these techniques? Learn them? Maeve seemed surprised by the question. I didn't learn them anywhere particularly. Just seemed like the logical way to solve the problems. You improvised advanced engineering solutions without formal training. Well, the principles are fairly straightforward, Maeve said, as if discussing basic arithmetic. Power systems need to connect to processing units. Life support requires atmospheric circulation and filtration. Navigation needs sensor input and computational processing. You just connect the components in ways that accomplish the necessary functions. Skarn's understanding of human education systems began to require revision. If Maeve could improvise complex engineering solutions without specific training, what were trained human engineers capable of? What about their research scientists, their military specialists? How many other humans are like you? Skarn asked. Like me how? Capable of this? Skarn gestured toward the nebula behind them, the improvised ship repairs, the casual violation of known survival parameters, surviving impossible conditions, while maintaining complex problem-solving capabilities. Maeve thought about it seriously. Most humans, I'd say, this isn't particularly unusual work. Bit more travel than average, perhaps, but nothing extraordinary. Most humans could survive in the Carrion Nebula for 2 months, while maintaining pursuit of a fleeing target and improvising life support systems from spare parts. Well, they'd complain about it more than I did, Maeve said. But yes, most humans could manage it if they needed to. We're fairly adaptable. Skarn felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of galactic power structures. If Maeve represented average human capability, then every assumption about human limitations needed complete revision. Maeve had been demonstrating capabilities that exceeded Nalkith military specifications while describing them as unremarkable baseline competence. Maeve, Skarn said carefully, I think the Nalkith Council should probably know about this conversation. Should they? Maeve seemed genuinely interested. Why's that? Skarn looked back toward the nebula, a cosmic graveyard that had claimed hundreds of ships over the centuries. Now just another entry in a human bounty hunter's travel log. Because, she said slowly, I suspect we've been dramatically underestimating your species' operational parameters. Maeve nodded agreeably, as if species-wide intelligence failures were routine occurrences. That does happen sometimes. Humans tend to surprise people. As they cleared the nebula's edge, Skarn's ship sensors immediately began registering normal space conditions, manageable radiation, stable navigation references, communication range with civilized systems. Maeve activated her communication array and transmitted a standard completion notice to her contractors. Independent contractor Mae Parker to Bounty Commission Control, she said in the same polite tone she'd used throughout their chase. Target acquired and in custody. Estimated arrival at processing station Thornwall Station in 47 hours. No complications to report. Skarn listened to the transmission with something approaching awe. No complications. 2 months of impossible survival, improvised engineering, and relentless pursuit through conditions that destroyed starships. And the human classified it as routine job completion, with no complications worth mentioning. The response came through immediately. Acknowledged, Maeve. Nice work on this one. We know it was a tough assignment. Maeve keyed her response with casual precision. Not too bad, really. Quite enjoyed the scenery. Skarn's chromatic patches shifted through rapid configurations as she processed the implications. Maeve had just described the most dangerous region of known space as having good scenery. Either the human possessed an extraordinary capacity for understatement, or the Carrion Nebula genuinely wasn't particularly challenging by human standards. Given everything she'd observed over the past 2 months, Skarn was beginning to suspect the latter. 47 standard days later. High Counselor Thekvan reviewed the testimony transcripts for the 4th time in the secure chambers beneath the Nalkith capital. Her chromatic patches shifting through confused purple configurations. The fugitive Skarn had been remarkably cooperative during debriefing, providing detailed accounts of human behavior that challenged fundamental assumptions about species capability. She followed you through a Class 9 radiation field, Thekvan said, reviewing the key points. For 73 days, while improvising life support repairs from kitchen equipment and sewage processing components, and successfully maintaining pursuit, tracking through 3 separate lethal survival scenarios. Skarn added helpfully, while describing the experience as quite enjoying the scenery. Why? Because that was the job, Skarn said, repeating Maeve's explanation with the tone of someone who had finally understood a particularly obvious mathematical proof. According to her testimony, humans don't abandon contracted work due to environmental inconveniences. Thekvan's assistant, a cultural specialist named Keld, raised a tentative manipulator appendage. Honored counselor, perhaps this represents an unusual individual rather than species-wide capability. Skarn's chromatic patches shifted to definitive orange. I asked her that specifically. She indicated that most humans could perform similar tasks if required. She described this assignment as not particularly unusual work, and suggested that other humans would simply complain about it more. The council chambers fell silent. If Skarn's testimony was accurate, human operational parameters exceeded Nalkith military specifications by several orders of magnitude. And they considered this normal baseline competence rather than exceptional capability. Additional concerns, Skarn continued. The human Maeve mentioned that bounty hunting is considered entry-level work in human society. She indicated that more challenging occupations exist. The silence in the council chambers became profound. More challenging, Thekvan repeated slowly, than tracking fugitives through lethal cosmic phenomena while improvising survival equipment from spare parts and maintaining complex problem-solving capabilities. According to her testimony, yes, Keld consulted his data pad nervously. Immediate revision of human diplomatic status. Current classifications list them as moderate technological capability and standard biological resilience. Based on this testimony, both assessments appear to be catastrophically inadequate. Inadequate how? Well, Keld said carefully, if humans routinely survive Class 9 radiation exposure, while improvising advanced engineering solutions and maintaining complex operational objectives, our xenological databases may require comprehensive reconstruction. Thekvan activated her personal communication array, opening a direct channel to the Nalkith Intelligence Directorate. Priority intelligence update required. Human capability assessments require immediate comprehensive revision. Previous classifications appear to be based on insufficient data. Specifications for revision, honored counselor. Thekvan looked at Skarn's testimony transcripts Then, at the cultural specialist's preliminary analysis, assume previous assessments underestimated human capabilities by a minimum factor of 10, possibly significantly more. Understood, should we initiate enhanced surveillance of human territories? Negative, Thekven said quickly. Initiate enhanced diplomatic outreach. If humans possess the capabilities described in this testimony, we want them as allies, not subjects of intelligence operations. Skarn interjected quietly. Honored counselor, there's something else. During our conversations, the human Maeve mentioned that her work involved standard bounty collection protocols. She indicated that these protocols include provisions for indefinite pursuit duration. Indefinite meaning what, precisely? Years, if necessary. Decades. She stated that human contractors don't abandon assignments due to time constraints or environmental hazards. Thekven's chromatic patches cycled through several rapid configurations before settling on deep blue, the Nalkith expression for strategic recalculation. Keld, initiate immediate diplomatic outreach to human territories. Request comprehensive species capability assessments and upgrade their classification status to be determined pending further investigation. Yes, honored counselor. Should we mention the specific incident that prompted this inquiry? Thekven considered the question seriously. No, let's not alarm them unnecessarily. Simply indicate that we're interested in expanding cultural exchange programs. As the council session concluded, Skarn remained seated, reviewing her own memories of the chase. Maeve's casual competence, her matter-of-fact approach to impossible survival conditions, her complete lack of surprise at her own success. The human had treated a 2-month pursuit through cosmic death traps as routine professional activity. And somewhere in the galaxy, there were apparently millions more humans just like her, pursuing careers that made bounty hunting look like recreational activity. Skarn's chromatic patches shifted to thoughtful green. Perhaps it was time to reconsider her career in interstellar crime. If humans considered Maeve's capabilities average, then running from them was probably not a sustainable business model. The universe, she reflected, was apparently much more dangerous than the Nalkith had realized. Not because of cosmic phenomena or hostile alien species, but because it contained humans who treated impossible survival scenarios as minor inconveniences and pursued their objectives with the patient inevitability of geological processes. Maeve had been right, of course. The chase was never about speed or cleverness or finding the right hiding place. It was about time. And humans, as Maeve had mentioned, were very good at time.